Today we're back on our mission to survive in the Ashlands. While this is the second part of a series, you don't need to watch part 1 beforehand. To summarise what happened last time, we sailed to the Ashlands, died, met what was definitely too many of the new creatures, and then died some more. By the end we'd got ourselves a bit of Flametal, unlocking a whole heap of new things to craft. For today, our aims were to get to the Flametal ore that was surrounded by lava, and also to make a Battering Ram and use it to lay siege to a Charred Fortress. Sounds easy, right? Well, before any of that, the Battering Ram required Flametal, which was still at our base. This meant we would need to sail all the way back to the Ashlands. We didn't know how many of each type of metal we might need, and so we went overboard by doing the walk of shame to load up a cart with a fair amount of every metal we had. The next morning, it was time to head off. And after one very cinematic walk to the port, I casually deadlifted over 1,000 kilos to load up the boat with hopefully more metals than we would ever need. We said our goodbyes and began another long journey. On the way, we may have committed a crime by doing a hit and run on a Lox, but it probably didn't report us because it got attacked by a serpent right afterwards. That Lox was still having a better time than what we were about to have. We sailed through the night and into the next morning. And because we learned from last time, we took a portal home and replenished the rested bonus. I took care of some important business before everyone got an especially good night's sleep.
Stuff because I was cooking. Oh my god! Just saw the thing. Oh, wonderful.
The next day, 2 of us came back to finish the trip, and entering the Ashlands was pretty much what we expected, with a bone maw serpent following us in. But then, one serpent turned into 2, and when the vultures attacked, we found out that one of us had made the most basic mistake you can in this game.
Oh no, I died. I didn't have anything to eat. I forgot.
No.
My grave's just there, floating in the water. Fuck.
Oh no.
I took control of the ship, but when another vulture attacked, I put it on autopilot. And I watched as this vulture glitched out and somehow kept on taking damage from the boat, meaning I didn't need to do a thing. After that was taken care of, I calmly started to reverse the ship as I looked for a way out. Oh, never mind. The ship filled with metals had been destroyed. I had steam coming off me, the serpent was following me, and my stamina was getting low. So I was extremely lucky to catch a wave that let me get on top of one of these rocks. Turns out this was actually a great spot to kill the serpent. It just stuck its head out, so I kept left clicking until it was dead. Maybe even it was sick of living in this horrible place, who knows. Either way, killing it actually unlocked 2 new weapons. But that wasn't much use to me right now. I was stuck here, sitting in the waves and waiting for the others to sail the boat that was still in the Ashlands back over to me. Now, I didn't get to see any of what was happening, all I could do was listen.
Oh, fuck me.
Holy
That is
shit!
big damage.
That was so much
Kill
damage.
this thing, like, holy shit. Dead here if you hit a think. Oh, right.
One more hit.
I'll get it. Yeah,
Nice.
let's go. Easy.
Alright.
I want to know, who was the developer that when they were pitching ideas said, let's put a bunch of rocks where you have to bring the biggest ship?
Eventually the others sailed right past me, being chased by yet another serpent. Again, they went out of sight, so this is what I heard.
No, the
I'm
boat,
falling through the
boat's
water.
dead.
The road is destroyed.
Oh my god.
How?
What did that happen?
The serpent that started to target me got bored and left, and with no one coming to save me, I decided to try and swim over to the materials for my boat. I thought if I could collect it all, maybe I could make my way over to one of the survivors and rebuild it. It was a long shot, but I didn't have a better plan, so I went and picked up what I could. Even though the iron nails were floating, the ceramic plates had sunken. I gave up and tried to get back onto the rocks, but it turned out I'd been cooking for a little too long. Maybe I should have taken a fire resist potion, but I don't know if it would have helped. In any case, the shock of seeing the serpent heads on the wall brought me back to life, and so I found any equipment I could and got the materials to make another boat. I went back for what was now my 4th time sailing into the Ashlands. We were in a rush since there was still a survivor there waiting for us on the rocks. At the edge of the biome, we were again greeted by a serpent because, of course we were. Nonetheless, we carried on until my friend jumped into the water to collect his stuff. The serpent followed him, meaning it was no longer my problem. So while he got himself onto a rock to distract and eventually kill that serpent, the survivor made her way back to the boat.
Hey.
Hello.
We were being left alone, so I took this chance to pick up my equipment, and with the three of us reunited on the ship, I moved us closer towards the wreckage. We jumped in the water and picked up the lost metals, effortlessly swimming with hundreds of kilos of the stuff. And after we'd got everything collected, we then started to make our way to the shore. I'd picked a really bad path through these rocks, and when we were getting really close to the shore, I had to do some reverse parallel parking while yet another serpent laid into the ship. We kept getting hit, but this time we made a workbench on the rocks, allowing us to repair the boat right before it got destroyed. After that, it was easy. We made it to the shore, dealt with the welcome party waiting for us, and then took the portal back to our home. 6 minutes into the video, and we'd finally delivered the metals to the Ashlands. Now we can get into the real gameplay. Perfect. This is when we started to test out some of the new items. I was mostly interested in these basalt bombs, since their description implies they might let you create a path over the lava. And it turns out that is exactly what they do. We'd got ourselves a way to reach the Flametal rocks that weren't accessible by land. I almost found out the hard way that these platforms only last around 40 seconds before sinking back down. We also tried out these bombs in the Ashland Sea, but I guess that while that water is hot enough to kill you, it still isn't enough to make a platform. The next thing to test out was the explosive payload. It says it's best used with a catapult, which we didn't have, but we wanted to see if we could make it explode another way. Because we would never do anything that would destroy our home, we went outside and tried to put it in a campfire. Pretty disappointing. Finally, we made some of the new smoke bombs. While living creatures in this game will take smoke damage, and trust me, I've checked, the undead creatures of the Ashlands already smoke a pack a day and still feel fine, so there must be some other use for these bombs. Besides, they don't even do enough damage to take out a chicken. So with that out of the way, we got a good night's sleep before getting ready to explore the Ashlands for more Flametal ore. So this was recorded on the last patch before the official release of the Ashlands, and since I'm trying to avoid spoilers, I'm not sure if any changes have been made. Compared to the last time we played, it did seem like the patches had reduced enemy numbers a little. In my opinion, if before the patch the Ashlands looked like this, then now it looked more like this. To give it a baseline, this is my depiction of the Mistlands. So having said all that, I don't know if what happened next was meant to be intended, but it was pretty funny.
Wait, how did the vulture catch on fire?
Maybe one of the.
What is going on?
They do it keeps happening, doesn't it? Are they lighting themselves on fire? Is it like a kamikaze attack?
What the hell is
They keep
going on?
spawning. What the fuck?
Around here, I picked up a new resource, charcoal resin. So far, the only use we'd found for it was that when you break pottery, you could use this stuff to then glue it back together. Amazing. Now that we'd spent a bit more time with these new enemies, we'd learnt a few important lessons. It seemed that those fallen Valkyries don't spawn with contact lenses because they normally don't see you unless there's a fight already going on. Also, you can trick these lava blobs into blowing up by moving in close and getting away at the last second. The most important lesson was not to fight Ask's fiends with your back to the lava. One of our party found this out the hard way, and I narrowly survived.
He butted me into the fucking
Oh my god!
the knockback on that motherfucker.
We'd searched a few places and didn't find any Flametal, so we went back to where we'd originally seen some rocks in the distance. Of course, there were enemies along the way, but we made it here relatively unscathed. I'll admit that I was a little worried about this ballista possibly knocking us into the lava, but we decided to ignore it as I made us a path to the ore.
Did it not work?
What the hell?
Oh, wrong ones.
Smoke bombs.
Okay, now I made us a path to the ore.
3,
3,
2, 1, go.
The four of us started mining as much of the Flametal ore as we could, until even the platform we were standing on started to sink. By throwing more basalt bombs, we safely made a path back to the land. This would be the last time we were near lava without someone falling into it. Case in point.
Did you die?
Yeah, the Asmin pushed me into the lava.
Okay.
I had lava.
It's almost like she didn't watch this video beforehand. So while we waited for her to return, I made a campfire to keep us warm. But then,
Oh,
Yeah,
there's an
11.
Asmin attacking the portal.
so we had to return to our base. By the time we got back, the portal had been destroyed, so I went and picked up the materials. There were still plenty of enemies around, making me freak out as I remade the thing and wrote in the tag. I forgot I was still carrying ore, so in a hurry, I just dropped it on the ground, and while I was one hit away from dying, I ran back in a loop and then towards the portal, ditching the last person there. Right as I went through, the Ask Fiend destroyed the portal and the remaining person there died. At some point beforehand, our secondary portal must have also broken, so guess what that means? I was getting deja vu from what was now my 5th trip back to the Ashlands. This time, the sailing went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as it can in this place. We landed a little away from our base and built a new backup portal over here. Then, we returned to secure the area. Working as a team, we cleared out the base pretty easily. Although, there were still these vultures that I think forgot how to fly properly. Throughout all of this, we'd started to build a proper shelter in the Ashlands. We normally had 4 roles: smelting the metals, guarding the area, building the base, and managing the project. Guess which role I chose? Interesting how no one seemed to care about protecting the manager, as I was clearly the most important member of the team. We struggled to work out how to make corners with the new roof pieces, which, believe it or not, had deadly consequences.
Oh, blob, blob,
Doesn't
blob,
it look
blob.
good? I can't.
Oh, it's fucking lava here.
I'm dead.
We only figured out how to make it with some open air in the corners, meaning that the air conditioning bill was going to be insane. We went on another trip to get more Flametal ore, and we noticed that in particular we were seeing fewer Morgans than before the update. We found another rock, and actually managed to take down 2 Axe Fiends without anyone getting knocked into the lava. While it was impressive for our standards, it didn't mean that nobody ever fell into the lava. We thought the best way to honour her was to pretend it didn't happen and just keep on mining anyway. When the rock started to sink, I threw some more bombs. Then we tried to make our way back to safety.
Oh, what the hell? Something just hit me. What the fuck was
Oh
that?
no, we're all fucked. We're fucked, bro.
Well, you were launched into the lava, I guess.
At the time, I thought it might have been an enemy that had knocked me into the lava, as I didn't realise that these fireballs could even hit you like that. Luckily, it was a mistake that I would never let happen again. On my way back to my stuff, I'd attracted a lot of enemies, and it only got worse when everything went dark, with my FPS going into the single digits. This was the first storm we'd seen in the Ashlands. I didn't know at the time, but the path I'd taken was a dead end. Everyone ended up splitting up or dying, so I just did my best to take on these creatures by myself and try to stay alive. And at one point, I even managed to lose all of the enemies. But when I tried to make a break for it, I was spotted by 3 Axe Fiends, and I didn't stand a chance. To deal with all this stress, I tried to relax for a little bit, but I couldn't get any peace and quiet.
Don't run now. There's a Valkyrie following me on the path. I'll
The
try and...
undead army marches. There's a raid.
Oh, I don't know what...
Oh,
Oh,
the
my
base.
god.
Oh,
I've got 2
nothing.
starred warriors on me
I
as
got
well.
nothing.
By the time I'd got dressed and put out the candles, the raid on our base was nearing its end. Again, I selflessly sacrificed myself by leading all the enemies away from the others, since they were mostly running around naked, trying to get their stuff back. Considering I ended up having another 3 Axe Fiends chasing me, I lasted for longer than I thought. Now, last time I asked how to actually pronounce Axe Fiend, and unlike all the other Scandinavian words in this game, a couple of people said I was close to pronouncing it right. Someone else said it was more like Usk's Fiend, Maybe it's just a difference in languages, because people said that in Icelandic, Swedish and Danish it means ash swine or ash boar, which was comforting to know as one of them killed me. Nonetheless, we'd eventually regrouped and headed back to where we'd lost our belongings. I dipped my toes into the lava to see if it was still hot. It was. Then we got to recollecting our stuff. We had to mess around a little to get the platforms in the right spot, but it wasn't too bad. Someone then noticed there was some Flametal ore floating in the lava. I decided I'd go get it because there was no way anything else could go wrong.
You guys might have to help me back. Maybe when I start... Oh, no, not again! What the fuck is that shit?
Oh yeah, it just...
Oh my god.
One of those
Fuck
flame
this,
balls
man.
come up from the thing.
We're gonna stay here.
And what was my life worth?
Okay, I got it.
How much was it?
How much ore was it that he died for?
Two. It was 2.
That's right, 2 Flametal ore. Absolutely worth it. So I ran back naked to the lava, and while the others battled creatures and had fun, I just sat there and waited for them. Eventually they came and helped me, and this time there weren't any balls of lava there to give me a jump scare. By this point, we'd had enough with looking for Flametal ore, so we started to prepare to siege the fortress. Personally, I worked extremely hard by cooking everyone hot meals and brewing more important potions. We started to make our way to the Charred Fortress, and while those fallen Valkyries can be pretty dangerous, being near lava made them 10 times worse. When a second person got pushed in, her scream was so loud that her mic just completely gave up. So while the others came back to get their stuff, we finished off the Valkyrie. Then, as a team, we proceeded to clear out the area around the fortress, so that no other creatures would get involved when we started our siege. We made a battering ram, then we just needed to figure out how to use it.
Okay, now how do we fire it?
As I got a free acupuncture session done, I saw where to load in the wood.
Wait. Jesus, you squashed me into...
So after adding in some wood and turning the thing around the right way, I got in and then started to break down the door.
Nice.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Oh, it does the walls.
Is it working?
Cool. It's
Oh, I
working.
see something scary behind
Yeah, I see some shooting
Oh,
outside
it's just
to
a
be
warrior.
ready.
It's a warrior.
I'm gonna get fucked banana. Holy fuck.
We don't bone mass. On bone mass.
I'm already dead.
Fuck me.
Emme!
Oh my
Oh,
god.
shit, there's a lot of them. That's a
I
lot
want a
of them.
grenade or something, bro.
Oh my god!
Just back it up, Frio. Just run.
Run.
While I can't say I envied the others, I did find whatever equipment I could and headed back as soon as possible. On the way, I kept running into more enemies, and since I didn't want to bring them to the others, I fought my own battle here. I hadn't really done much fighting solo, and so this was when I started to work out the Valkyrie's moves. I would parry the melee attacks, dodge the Crash Bandicoot's spin, and then just keep running around as it shot out those fireballs. This ended up being a really close battle. Near the end, I started to get impatient. And then right as I was about to finish off the Valkyrie, I panicked and just jumped into its spin attack. So close. We regrouped back at the base. The others had all died, and so it was my job to keep the enemies occupied while they ran back naked to their stuff. While I didn't see that Valkyrie again, I did run into some more Axe Fiends. One thing I really respect about these creatures is how they have friendly fire turned off. I swear they did more damage to each other and the surrounding enemies than they did to me. Eventually, the others had found their equipment,
Nice.
and now as a team, we started to fight our way back to the fortress.
Nice.
Yay.
Good shit.
Nice.
We made our way forwards, and for a little bit it looked like we might just be able to walk into the fortress. But then the remaining troops started pouring out. We had to retreat a little, and in particular the marksmen really started to whittle down our health as we concentrated on the warriors. Still, we held strong and picked them off one by one. We then approached the entrance, and I could finally get back to my tombstone. We hadn't won just yet, as there were still plenty of enemies here. At one stage, the battering ram started rolling towards the lava, so I slowly pushed it back up, before then hitting it back down the hill, watching it, and deciding it wasn't my problem. From there, the battle just kept getting bigger. At one point, someone noticed there were spawners inside the fortress, and so the rest of us tried to distract the enemies while one of the team snuck inside to destroy them.
I've got a Morgan and 2 warriors on me.
I'm with you, I'm with
Really
you.
out here.
Coming over.
Things were trying to hit me and they destroyed the thing for me.
Nice.
So the spawn is dead?
One. There's another one here.
Okay.
Again, they destroyed it for me. I just stayed right next to it while I was getting my stamina back. Okay, there's no more spawners.
Nice, good work.
Even with the spawners destroyed, there was just too much going on to take out the warlocks that were still summoning more enemies. So we decided to retreat and rest up. We still had to turn and fight everything following us, so that we didn't bring it all back to our base. I think this ended up being a good idea, since it was an easy way to split up all of these creatures.
Nice.
The next day we headed back. The hole that we wanted to use to tame Ask Fiends was almost empty, so when we saw a Morgan, we wanted to lure it in again. While we failed to push it in on our first attempt, it made its own way into the hole soon after.
Oh, come on, come
He's
on, come on.
He's in. Nice.
We started to jog to the Charred Fortress until we realised it would look cooler if we just walked instead. Along the way, we found the battering ram which had somehow just survived, so we repaired it and carried on. As we approached the fortress, there were definitely fewer creatures than last time. And without new enemies constantly being spawned, it wasn't too hard from here. When we got rid of the other Morgan, we took out a final archer before running into what was an empty fortress. While those earlier disasters almost broke us, our persistence paid off as we found so many new items here.
Jade. Staff of the Wild.
Oh, molten core!
Iolite.
Portal stone!
Nice.
Heck yeah! A new portal, baby!
And we were very happy to find out what the ballista dropped.
Unlock the catapult.
Nice.
Yes!
We had too much stuff, so while we were on our way back to our base, I checked out what the stone portal did.
You can teleport metals.
Nice. Let's go.
Fuck yes.
Pay to win.
There was still another door on the inside of the fortress, so when we came back, we used the battering ram to knock it down. Here we found some more of the same items in a chest, along with a case containing bell fragments. I thought these were probably to summon the next boss, and when I remembered to turn the ravens back on, Moonin pretty much confirmed it. As we went back, there were still a couple of things we wanted to test out. If you connect the stone portal to a regular one, you can only teleport metals starting from the stone portal, not the other way around. Finally, we had to try out the catapult. I put a payload in and it fired immediately. I realised you probably meant to lower the legs first,
Oh, what?
What happened? I was looked away. What the fuck did kill you?
That's so stupid!
and I found a new way to die. Next, we tried out an explosive payload, and it was cool to see that it actually can break stone. And then, of course, we tried shooting me out of it instead.
Oh. Holy shit. It flung me right into enemies.
No, you're too far out, mate. You're on your own.
Oh. I'm dead.
I am curious to see what this thing does against the fortress, but that will be for next time. Now, a couple of people mentioned that we should be using more magic, and I agree. While we've been putting it off because none of us have any skills in it, I do need to try out this new troll staff, along with the other ones we've unlocked. So I think I'll find some Grey Dwarves to level up my magic skills for next time. I think the difficulty is a bit better now, but sometimes the battles go on for so long that I just lose focus. And I don't care if it was my fault for not noticing those balls of fire, but I now hate the knockback on them. This was recorded over around 15 hours, and most of our deaths were due to just not being well prepared. But I really do feel for solo players, especially for when you're first sailing into the biome. Make sure you bring wood to make a workbench, and repair the boat mid-journey if you need to. If in doubt, just do the opposite of what we do, and you should be okay. Anyway, I'll leave it there for today. Next video that comes out will be something I've worked on for a long time, so I can't wait to get that done. After that, I think we'll be continuing our below average journey into the Ashlands. As always, thank you so much for watching. Cheers.